Welcome to another episode of Video Store Rejects. This is a podcast where we discuss directors' filmographies and our favorite film franchises. I'm your host, Cody House. With me is my co host, Chris Jacobs. If you notice, a lot of our postings on our Facebook page mostly comes from this guy, our social media manager, I would say.
I try. I try
Uh,
for you people.
today, Today we have new guests on the show, Sean and Dan. Welcome to the
And
show.
Hello.
Welcome.
And
And
also, I want to say thank you for being able to reschedule because I know we were supposed to do this like a month ago, but I came back from vacation and got the COVID, so I was
oh,
incapacitated. Well, I wasn't completely incapacitated. I just wasn't in the mood to be on microphone talking for 45 to 90 minutes about something. So I appreciate that.
no, that's okay.
So my first question to you is, are you both fans of the Coen brothers as filmmakers?
Um, Generally, I think not fanatics, but I think we like to see what they do. I think that's where what I would say. I like to see what they come up with and what they have.
Agreed.
well, here's a question. What do you? I know we're here for a specific movie, but since it is Coen Brothers, I have to ask this. What are your? Do you guys like the Big Lebowski?
You go first.
I like parts of the Big Lebowski. I think it's an interesting movie, but I can't say that I'm part of that the cultism of it.
Right,
I
right.
enjoy some of it, um, but it's some of their movies don't um, resonate with me. I should say,
Cool.
you know what I mean. But I enjoy some of it. I enjoy some of
Okay.
it.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. You
I'm
might
gonna
have.
exit at this time because I'm gonna confess that I have not seen it, and at this point, it's like Disney World where I haven't gone, so like I'm not going to. So have a good day, guys. Good luck.
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes it clicks with some people, and some people it doesn't, and it's a mixed bag. But
Mhm.
kind of like all their stuff, like you said.
But I understand that it's kind of iconic for many people, and they enjoy it, and I can understand why they enjoy it. It's just but it's just not something that was as strong with me.
Right. It's different.
Yeah.
So I do like that approach that you mentioned. Like maybe you don't specifically like a lot of their movies, but you know that they're interesting filmmakers,
Yeah.
and you just want to see like what they do next because that is something at least that you're championing. Like, oh well, these guys have an original voice and they're doing
Right.
something interesting, even if I don't find it interesting. Like I appreciate that
Yeah.
too, even. So, and yeah, some people like if you took a poll of like people's top 5 films, I guarantee you all of us would have a different list because of what style of film we probably prefer. And some people like their comedies better, some people like their dramas better.
And I think,
And go ahead.
and I think what's interesting is the fact that depending on the day and depending on the mood, which even of their filmography you will appreciate and find differently, and which ones you find rewatchable and which ones you don't really want to revisit.
Right, like I was supposed to do an episode on The Serious Man and I hadn't watched that since it came out, and that's a movie like I admire its filmmaking and its craft, but it's like one I'm not like I don't really want to
That's
rewatch this one
that's
as
a tough
much as
watch. That's a tough
yeah.
movie to watch. Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Whereas this one that we're going to be talking about, True Grit, I could rewatch this
Mm,
all the time.
It's
And
very
yeah.
I mean it's probably one of their more conventional films. I mean, it famously was a movie in the 60s starring John Wayne. He won an Oscar. if you have a relative that's a baby boomer, you probably have seen a portrait or a clock of the man as this character in their living room.
Yeah, I was going to say, having grown up with, my dad being a boomer, and uh, again being in Texas. I know westerns are worldwide, but it's just bigger here. I grew up watching the Wayne version of this movie. So when I found out the Coen brothers were going to do it, I was like, this is going to be really. It's either going to be really weird or really good for a western. And man, they really knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, I'm gonna say it. I don't think it's controversial opinion in a lot of circles, but I know my dad would probably argue with me, but I think this is the superior version of the story.
I would
Oh, for
agree.
sure.
I would agree. Yeah.
And not cuz it's closer to the book, which it is, but I think like they did a better job of casting the supporting cast around Rooster Cogburn because there's much to be desired in some of the acting choices. And it's also a, different time period in film as well. But I mean, my goodness, Haley Steinfeld, who was like only 13 or 14 when she's cast here, that's got to be one of the best child performances in a movie ever.
And she's so ubiquitous now that you forget that that was like her first breakthrough role. And she's just everywhere.
Yeah, and she's got to carry the movie with, these legends. You're acting against Jeff Bridges and Matt Damon, who are pretty well known movie stars or respectable actors in the industry, and holding her own with them.
Mhm. Yeah, we were actually very surprised when we watched it. We were, um, I don't think we really knew what to expect, but we're Western fans. We like westerns. I think in today's, I think it's really hard to make a Western work today compared to when they were so big, way back then. Every movie used to be a Western. And every movie kind of is a Western in a way because all American movies have that Western kind of feel to them. But this one, it's kind of hard to make them work. Like with when they did the remake, for example, of Magnificent Seven, it worked but it was very much an action movie. You know what I mean? It didn't carry the same kind of plot weight that this movie carries. So this is the first Western that modernly that works with kind of a plot that everybody gets attached to. You know what I mean? Like it's not just a shootout. It's not just that kind of basic Western formula. There's something complicated that goes along with it. So I think that's really that makes it very unique, and it's very unique for them because they're so Coen Brothers, all that like Serious Man, all that stuff. It's very cynical stuff. It's very. That's why some of it's so hard to watch. And you're like, I know this isn't going to end well, but this is a movie they made that even with all the cynical parts of it and things falling apart and the team falling apart and the people not liking each other and how it all comes together at the end for this redeeming factor. You know what I mean? And people getting justice and getting what they deserved, and everybody just showing their best at the end. Really, that's really what happens between the three of them, and it's really something. It's really different from anything else they've made, I think. And for Western, I think it just came across as superior to any other Western I've seen made in the past 10, 15 years.
I'll tell you one of the draws for myself, and I don't know about you guys, and it kind of hit me when we did the review for Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, is the dialogue and how the dialogue is written in the wordplay. It reminded me a lot of watching Deadwood, but without the vulgarity. Like it's just the dialogue that they use and the wording and the phrases and everything that if you look at the writings from the time, I guess they did their homework really, really well, and when they wrote that dialogue, because it was just outstanding.
Well, even and this is what's interesting is that even the villains come across as well spoken and kind of educated and even gentlemen. You know what I mean? So you kind of even like them a little bit. You know, so
Right.
it's just it's a very the characterization and the as a character study of each person would be very interesting. But just as a whole, the talking back and forth really does drive the movie. I think you're correct there.
You hit an interesting point I want to bring back up when we talk about some of the performances, especially with Barry Pepper's character that you mentioned. But Chris, I think the dialogue is what makes me be like, oh yes, this is a Coen Brothers movie because there's like this rat-a-tat-tat of the dialogue that's similar. They have like a style that was in those like screwball comedies from the 30s and 40s. Like I have to imagine the Coens are fans of Howard Hawks and Preston Sturges with the delivery of the dialogue and how it's back and forth. And
without it,
especially, go ahead.
but without it suffering from the Aaron Sorkin-ness of it. It's sharp and
Right.
it's quick, but it's not out of place or any. There's no tone to it other than uniquely.
It's not just wordy,
paced. Correct.
wordy stuff.
We'll call it.
Yeah.
But I mean, particularly the scene where she's with the where she's bargaining with the horses and the money that's paid back to her with that guy.
Oh,
I
that
just
was
know him from Gilmore Girls. I don't know his name.
Oh my
that
gosh.
was wonderful. That scene.
It's just hilarious, and it reminds you like, okay, they still, even though they're adapting someone else's work, they were able to put their touch in the movie.
I think that's also important because you haven't seen the Coens prior to this do a lot that isn't personal to them, especially when you look at like A Serious Man, which is very personal to them.
Mm-hmm.
And to have them have that distance yet still make it themselves and you can tell it's their film, it gives that nice balance that I wasn't sure how it was going to translate.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting that their two biggest financial hits, or well, I don't know. No Country may not be their second biggest financial hit, but it is one of their more cultural and popular films. Are two films that are based off someone else's material because they are filmmakers that are known for like creating their own screenplays. Like, even though they say, oh, this was, Miller's Crossing is a mix of Dashiell Hammett novels, and Oh Brother Where Art Thou is a adaptation sort of Homer, but not completely. Like, they draw from material, but this is truly them adapting something and still making it a Coen Brothers movie through and through.
And it changes when you take them both out of it. Have you guys done Macbeth yet?
We have not done Macbeth yet. I enjoyed it for its filmmaking and, of course, its acting. It's Denzel and Frances McDormand, but it felt like, and the cinematography and the British actress who plays all the witches was phenomenal.
Production design, it was really good. It was nice and short, which was welcome. When I had to hear students lament that they have to read it. But this one was it was a personalized adaptation without, it was that nice balance. And even though I know it's only one of the Coen brothers doing the tragedy of Macbeth, which I did really like, it didn't have that same feel.
It was missing something. And I'm not meaning this as disrespectful, but it felt like a really extremely well production of like Shakespeare in the Park.
Mm.
And the plot makes sense of why Joel Coen would be interested in it, because most of the Coen brothers movies deal with protagonists making a bad decision and just things keep blowing up in their face till it gets worse and worse. So the plot of Macbeth makes sense why he was drawn to it. But yeah, you're right. It's missing that. And I don't know if it's Ethan not there to balance out the screenplay, or it's just they didn't put any touches of humor that are usually in their movies?
Aside from that one scene that they did not take from the script,
Yeah.
that was great.
I do really like the Stephen Root stuff in there too, like his little bit. But yeah, overall, it's like you're right. That's what's missing. And what do you guys think of Jeff Bridges as Rooster Cogburn? I think he does do something different to the character. And of course, you can't do John Wayne because for whatever reason in society, especially with older people, he's like immortalized to where he's not even a human. Like he's like, I don't know, like a
A
Greek
deity.
god to some people. And
Yeah.
like
They
I'm not here
I,
to bad talk John Wayne because he is a screen legend, but there's things we found out about John Wayne as a human. He was not always a great guy, and you know, s- some people get mad when you mention, yeah, well, he turned people in saying they were communists, and he wasn't particularly nice to some of his younger screen actors because of their politics, and he's one of the few actors that didn't serve in the military, even though he was all gung ho about fighting, even though a lot of his other actors of the same age did fight during World War II.
read about Jimmy Stewart.
Mm.
It's pretty interesting as far as World War II. But yeah, I think he tried to distance himself from John Wayne. I know he wanted to do something completely. He was like, "This is. I don't want people to look at this and say I'm imitating John Wayne, or why isn't he doing that like John Wayne, or um, I don't know, something of that sort. It's like I just feel like he was making it his own. Making it his own character without trying to imitate anyone.
I like how he speaks because it seems like in certain times you can't understand what he says, and he kind of slurs his words sometimes, especially the courtroom scene, the first scene where he's giving his testimony and like you can't the way he kind of mutters and it's just funny, like he doesn't enunciate the way that Matt Damon does. There's such a difference between the two, and I mean, you're supposed to see that contrast, but that's just one of the things, how he slurs it. And you can see that he kind of carries that same character or that same kind of speech pattern. He carries that over into Hell or High Water when he does that movie. It's the same kind. Well, I mean, that's in Texas too, but it's the same kind of, the same kind of speech pattern. So it's interesting. You can tell that he kept some of that when he did that next Western that he did. But it was that's one of the big things that I noticed is that he does when he speaks. I think he put a lot of it was obviously deliberate, but he doesn't articulate the same way. You know what I mean? That many of the other characters in the movie do. He still has that vocabulary and things like that, but his pronunciation, his enunciation is almost kind of lazy a little bit. So it's interesting.
That's what it is. You hear that a lot in the South, like with
Mm.
a lot of older folk around here. And I mean, it passes on to the younger people too. I mean, everybody picks it up. I know I do that. We just have that twang on certain words or certain phrases that we say, and it just sometimes it'll come out sounding mumbled. But if you're from this area, you'll pick up on it. You'll know exactly what it is. You're like, oh, okay, and then
Yeah.
you'll respond. You'll respond in a mumbled, slurred, response, and then we get. It's just a back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those are two great performances of him doing that, but I also feel like there's a bad part of that performance because he did that in a movie called R.I.P.D. 2, and it's
Oh
like it's,
gosh, yeah.
it's like you can't even understand a thing he's saying in that movie, and it's
That might
like
have been on purpose. That might have
I
been an effort to
forgot
save
about
some of
that
that.
one. I forgot about that one.
Yeah.
Well, both him and Brolin sound the same, and it's them. It always sounds like if you take someone not from the South, and then you tell them to do an accent, it always sounds like they have something stuffed in their mouth, like they're chewing on something, or they got a full cheek of food. I know that sounds gross, but that's just, it almost sounds like that when they talk.
Speaking of Brolin, you guys know where Brolin's from? Because he's kind of picked up this persona of this accent a little bit in his voice now that he's done so many of these movies. He's from Oregon.
Really?
I was gonna guess New York, so.
And then the funniest one, not an actor that's in this movie, but definitely famous for playing cowboys, Sam Elliott. Guess where Sam Elliott's from?
That's gotta be a coast.
He's from California. And apparently, I guess he just decided, because apparently he's on the Mission Impossible TV show, and like at the beginning of the time he was on, he didn't have that voice, and then apparently he decided he was going to do the cowboy voice, and that's just apparently how he talks now.
It must have gotten him the roles that he wanted, I guess.
But yeah, I just think it's kind of funny sometimes people who pick up these accents and they're like nowhere from the area. But Jeff Bridges got an Oscar nomination, and there are some people who argue he should have got the Oscar for this one instead of Crazy Heart that he won the year prior.
Well, no one knew this was coming necessarily. He lost. Who did he lose to for that?
To Colin Firth for King's Speech.
Oh yeah, there was no stopping that one.
I mean, that's an Oscar movie, right? It's based on a true story. It's about overcoming, and it's British. The Academy loves that's like checks all their boxes for what
it has the Queen in it.
Yeah.
Family, like
oh hey,
good movie. Yeah.
I will tell you this: Jeff Bridges did a better job with this accent than he did with his British accent in that movie. Oh, what was it? It's a fantasy movie where they're going after witches. Yeah.
Oh wait, he had a British accent in that?
Or it wasn't really British, but he was trying to use that proper, I guess, kind of like Kevin Costner did in Robin Hood, where he's like, I'm not going to go full British, but I'll sound proper, damn it.
Oh, I vaguely remember that. I think that was like it's some YA novel they adapted. It was like after Hunger Games came out, and they were trying to like adapt every young adult, not fantasy sci-fi story.
Yeah, he takes on an apprentice to help him slay witches or something like that, and it was odd seeing him. He sounds really weird in that movie, but
he was in The Giver too.
Yeah, he's the old guy in The Giver, or he is the Giver.
I that one has also been erased and replaced.
Yeah, it's been erased from memory because I guess it didn't do well. But again, you know how Hollywood is when there's something popular, they're gonna try and because when Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter came out, they tried to adapt every fantasy series.
Still are.
Yeah, I think they've gotten a little bit better. Not all are successful, but I think going to television is a better route for that sort of adaptation than film.
Well, he was in Stick It.
In Stick It, yeah, he was the coach with the popped collar. That's right.
That's the one I remember, which is really embarrassing, and so that's
yeah, and he was in Blown Away, where he was the on the bomb squad.
That Tommy Lee Jones with an Irish accent.
Yeah, that was pretty good. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, not bad. Yeah, Jeff Bridges has steadily worked for 50 years. He's been around. He's been in a lot of things, and some aren't great, but he's been in some really good projects and continues to get good work. Like, I've heard nothing but praises for his new TV show. And him in the movie, I guess living in Texas, I'm not a native Texan, So I love when he's like taking a piss out of Matt Damon about how
Yeah.
the Texas Rangers brag about we drink nothing but from a hoof, and he's like, if I've heard that one more time, and he's like, you don't believe me? Well, yeah, the first 25 times I heard. And then, of course,
That's great.
when he says there's not a tree from here to Canada, that's also pretty funny to me because it's true. Depend Our part of Texas has plenty of trees. We're in the east part, but yeah, if you're like in West Texas and you just drive all the way to Canada, that's probably the first time you'll see a tree.
Yeah.
I also really like the way they used the score in this one for their themes and their motifs. I hadn't really noticed it until recently. They use a hymn for the central score and theme, and I really thought that was a nice touch, especially when you get towards the end and you've kind of forgotten about it because of the music through the more action dynamic scenes. You get the quieter moments where it comes back, and it's just much more evocative than I thought it was going to be.
Yes, I love the score and the use of that hymnal, which the only other movie I remember being used so heavily is Night of the Hunter.
First Reform too.
Oh, yeah. But I don't know if it's the music or I just am getting old and cry more easily, but like I cry at the end of this
What?
movie.
It works. It really does underline all of that and really reunites like the time part to it and just puts it together really nicely.
Yeah, and I was just checking to make sure it was Carter Burwell who did the score, who mostly does the scores for the Coen brothers. With the exception, I think, of Oh Brother and Inside Llewellyn Davis. But I guess it's also because, Maddie loses her father, and that's where she kind of starts on this sojourn, is to get revenge. And I guess in a lot of ways, Rooster is like a father figure to her in a way. Even to the
is. Yeah, I think you end up. I think there is some I mean, you don't know what to make of him at many times, because he's. I don't know. It's just back and a lot of back and forth, and you don't know what to make of him. But he does try to teach her things. He does try to show her things. But then I think you figure out who he is at the end when he has to make that ride all the way back, and he's got that for me is just a pinnacle of his character, that he's just and the shooting, the how they filmed that is really great. But everybody's panting, they're all out of breath, and you can hear it. You know what I mean? They really the sound effects during it, and you can the desperation and how serious it is, and it's a very very dramatic time, and it goes on for quite a while. The ride, they don't cut anything. You know what I mean? They just make it go, and they show the horse going out of breath, and then a horse dies, and he's got to kill the horse. And you're like, and she sees him do it, but even that's an act of mercy for the horse. It's not him being cruel, and you see him cruel throughout a lot of the movie, like he's a mean guy, but I think that was really the pinnacle of his character, was that ride back, and when he runs with her, like he just carries her the last whatever it was, miles or whatever it was, and then kind of collapses there and fires off his gun for them to come out. It's just such a great scene. I think that really shows who his character is at the end, and whether he's always like that, he probably is, but that his connection to her brings that out of him. You know what I mean? Even from the beginning, when she gets bit by the snake and he comes down and he takes it out and he tries to get the poison out, like those are all, you can tell he has an affection for her that is, that he's developed, and he feels responsible for her. So I think in that way he does have kind of a father-daughter relationship for that. Yeah.
Well, he fights it through the whole movie. Like he doesn't want to show any love. He wants to be distant and just a grumpy old man that wants the money for drinking, and and whatnot, and you
Yeah.
know, she whittles him down through the movie, and by the end, you know, I think by the time he charges head on um, into Ned Pepper and his guys is when he gives in. He's like, I'm going to do this. You know, this is more for her than it is
I was just gonna say that. I was just gonna say
than
that. Yeah.
yeah. This is
Or make
it's
that
not
same.
for the money. Yeah, it's not for the money anymore. This is, you know, they're going to kill her, and I've got to do something.
And just to show, and I think that's just to show her something, you know what I mean,
Right.
and to kind of demonstrate, to show who he is and who he's been, because the whole thing where he's just a fat old drunk person, you know what I mean, that's kind of a
Right.
how she's, and I think she calls him that shortly before she gets captured. Is that right?
She's
Or they have
frustrated
a
with him.
fight.
Yeah.
They have a
Yeah.
fight shortly before he gets captured, and I think he admits, he's like, I'm too old or something like that. Does he say something like that? Maybe?
No.
I can't remember now. I think there is some kind of an admission during that, but yeah, I think part of that is to prove himself to her. I think he wanted to do that. I think he wanted to show her who he really was, you know. So I think that I was going to say something along the similar lines, that it was very much for her, that moment, and that's a good point.
Actually, that what you guys are saying makes me wonder, because she is the narrator of the story and it's her recollection of it, if her inability to understand who he was as a person, because she never understood Brolin's character either, is that's why part of the reason that they don't have that distinctly crisp dialogue, that distinctly crisp tone, is because she's not really sure what their intents are, and she can't, like, when she's recalling it, she mumbles him, because he does become clearer following the shootout. His dialogue goes down, but you can understand him, I think, better.
Interesting.
That's an interesting point, because yeah, both him and Brolin do kind of mumble their words, and I think with Brolin it's because, of course, he's the antagonist for her. He killed her father. She wants him brought to justice, and she also thinks of him as not a very smart guy, and he comes kind of off as a buffoon especially compared to Barry Pepper's character, who seems to be a very intelligent and maybe even educated criminal. And like,
Ned Pepper showed his dominance over him, and who Brolin's character really was. He's a peon. He's not, you know, you're right. He probably is uneducated and has been in gangs in and out in jail and whatnot. So he's, but you know, Ned Pepper was like, no, you're going to stay here. And he was begging. He was even begging the dude that was making the animal noises. So it just shows where he is on the rung there. You know, which rung he is on the ladder, and he's at the bottom. And I don't know. He just did such a great job with that.
and I don't know if Ned Pepper, I guess he has some sort of code of ethics, even though he's a criminal, because he's like, don't harm this girl or you're not getting paid.
Mm.
And I think either he is just surprised or maybe a little bit respected that she came out there and was able to get a shot off of him.
I think so, and I think part of it is, and you might be right. There might be a criminal code of ethics where he's like, I'm not going to be responsible for killing a girl. You know what I mean? He may, like, I don't want part of that. But I think you're right that he does seem to appreciate her. You know what I mean? And her guts, so to speak, and even the way that they talk in their dialogue. When she's telling him why he's there, and and he seems to, I don't know, he just takes that in and respects that.
He'd probably rather have her than.
Yeah.
Like, hey, we're gonna have a spot open up pretty soon. Do you want to take care of that?
That look on Brolin's character's, Chaney's face when he sits down after they all leave him there, and he just looks so depressed. He's just so depressed and sad, and he's just not smart, and but he's doing this inner dialogue, and he's doing it out loud, and he goes, "I must think on how I can improve my position." And I'm like, that's such a weird line for somebody to say, but for some reason it just makes sense that he's talking to himself on it, and that comes off as like a Shakespearean kind of monologue there, where he's talking. He's in that moment. He's kind of talking to you. You know what I mean? He's breaking that wall a little bit. So I think that's interesting. So
I will say I like Barry Pepper, but that might be one performance I prefer from the original because Robert Duvall played it in the original. But of course, that's Robert Duvall. He's one of the most reliable, legendary character actors we've ever had. When does he phone it in? He's just always there. But I think Barry Pepper does a solid job, and he's a little frightening looking too. Like in the design of like his teeth are a little gross, and he looks a little crazy too. Like
and unhealthy, and like there is nothing for him to lose.
Correct. Yeah, he looks in rough shape. He looks like he probably doesn't eat that much, and maybe his organs are failing.
His liver is definitely jaundiced.
Yeah. That's the impression that I got too. He looked very sickly. Sean asked me, she's like, "What's up with the guy who makes the animal sounds?" Because I'm like, they didn't have TV and stuff back then, so they just.
What's hilarious is they took him along. They were like, "Nah, you're gonna come with us. You're hilarious. You're fun."
Yeah, exactly.
A guy for laugh.
And they left Cheney, and he's even. That's what I was getting at earlier. Is he's begging the dude that makes animal noises to like let him ride behind him, or like take him along, please. You're the jester. Please let me ride with you.
Yeah.
And I think that's why they, in that shootout, is a famous scene, Rooster grabs the reins of his horse and puts them in his mouth and just goes all in to kill them. I think that's, Ned meets his match with a lawman that's just as crazy as he is.
Yeah, they both have nothing to lose.
And
Rooster is.
He has questionable law. Like even in Wild West times, they're like, you don't have to kill all your prisoners that you come into contact to. You could bring some of them to court.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, that's probably what he's thinking. It's so much easier to haul a dead body. I don't have to worry about him escaping or
talking. He's not much of a conversationalist.
Yeah, he's very good.
What do we think of Matt Damon? We haven't talked much about him. What do we think of him
I
as
was
a cowboy?
surprised by Matt Damon at how well he played, because that was kind of one of my reservations. I mean, we weren't sure how we were going to feel about the movie anyway, but that was one of my reservations. But I think he really pulled it off. I think he nailed it. And there were times, and I don't say that a lot, where you didn't recognize that it was him. Usually, when it's Matt Damon, you can tell it's Matt Damon. You know what I mean? But in this case, there were times where I really bought his character. You know what I mean? I bought into it. I thought he did really well. And he was exactly. He came off as exactly as he was supposed to, So it was pretty good. I thought he did well.
And that's a big difference between the versions of the movies, and it's been a while since I read the book, so I imagine in the book the Damon performance is a little closer, but like the Glenn Campbell performance definitely comes off a little more buffoonish than, because like Damon's very well spoken. Like he's besides being a Texas Ranger, maybe he's a bit educated or had a relative that came from that spoke, I guess, a little more proper grammar than most people from Texas at that time.
I think his character design was also pretty interesting because he does, even though he speaks well, he still comes across cartoonishly to many of them just by an appearance, with the facial hair, the outfit, the outfit
posture is pretty significant.
And it's different colors, it's everything is different, and so they do their best to contrast him without giving him, animal noises.
But you don't, and so that's part of the reason that Rooster doesn't like him and doesn't trust him there, because he thinks he's a fraud or a phony. He's not really that good. But at the end, when he makes that shot, then you find out who he really is too, and that's really that reveal. Like, oh, he wasn't kidding.
Yeah,
he can really do that.
I think he just came across as brash and pompous
Yeah.
to everyone else, and that you don't get to, like you said, you don't get to really see him in action until the end. And you nailed it. He shows them. He's like, no, really, I'm that good.
Yeah.
Especially when you have the outpost shootout earlier on, and he just runs in blind.
He runs in and he gets caught. Well, he gets
right
in the trap. Yeah.
Right. So then that just kind of takes your expectation down even more of the guy. So initial presentation plus you have knowledge that he doesn't, and then the end leaves a nice reveal.
Also, the dynamics between Maddie and him are different, because even though Rooster's like fighting not to have any affection or want her along, like immediately when she shows up and Matt Damon spanks her and she's like, "Are you going to allow this to happen?" And he's like, "No, I'm not. Get your hands off her or I'm going to shoot you." Because it's kind of a weird dynamic. Like he mentions like that she's attractive, but she's only, I know it's a different time period in the Wild West, so but still it's kind of icky. And then he's like, "Well, you're still a child." Like it's like, okay, come on. And then at the end,
dialogue where he was like, I was gonna sneak in there and give you a pick on the cheek or something like that. I was like, hey, come on, man. I get it. It's different.
And then they get to a mutual respect of each other by the end of the journey,
which I think is important, because as revolting as like that thought is now, it's the Coens calling out the issues with films in the time and what was going on and how that would have been portrayed. Like, I would have done this, or I would have done this. And then getting to that respect and getting that she gets her place, and that's what she wanted. She wanted to be recognized as more of an equal.
Right.
And I could be mistaken, because in the original film, Kim Darby is an adult. So I think there is a little bit of a romance, or like that, back and forth. We can't stand each other at the beginning. Now we like each other sort of dynamic between them in the original, because she's older. Which was, it's been a long time, but I can't remember. But like, much better casting of both those characters with Matt Damon and Haley Steinfeld, in my opinion.
Oh, for sure.
Because I know that was a big criticism of people who love the book, was like, in the John Wayne movie, she's an adult, or at least appears adult, and she's not really the protagonist. Like, they make it more about Rooster Cogburn than her. It's not from her perspective as much.
I haven't seen the original in some time.
I know. I think I was a kid the last time I watched it.
I know it is his iconic role, though, John Wayne's role. I think that was the thing that a lot of people were resistant to. But I don't know. I think I should watch it again. I think it would be very challenging to see it on the same level as I see this movie. I think it would be very, very difficult.
I don't even know who directed the original, so
Yeah. And I wanted to give a shout out to the most random part in this movie to me, and that is the scene with the mountain man. And I absolutely love this scene.
Yeah.
Or the hermit. They're not really in the mountain. He seemed like a mountain man, but I don't the region that they're in. But anyway, it is so random, and maybe I'm missing something there. But I've always thought, like, what? That is just such an odd scene where he talks about the pulling a dead man's teeth, and he's a dentist and
A veterinarian and will
I'm a
treat
vet-
human patients if they will sit still.
yeah,
I think that's another Coen brother touch. You meet these random quirky characters for just a scene.
And the Native American who takes the dead body.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
I
play
mean,
Red
even
Dead, and that just seems such a Red Dead moment to me.
Yeah.
Like he just ran into this random like side quest, like
Right, and it
if
becomes
you
kind of
collect teeth for me,
yeah, it becomes like
I will.
an odyssey at that point. It does.
Yeah,
and I
Well,
mean you
oh, go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
I was gonna say the Domhnall Gleeson subset. That was it. That's another mini Coen Brothers, and I think that's what they really did with Buster Scruggs was take all those little flashes and then build them into vignettes and then put it together into a bigger story.
that's a good way of putting that, because that's Buster Scruggs is another favorite, like just such a wild movie.
I think that Donhelm Gleason scene also just shows you how ruthless and brutal Rooster can be, because like when things go south, he just all right, I'm just gonna shoot you in the face now. Like
Yeah,
it's very quick. Like that
Yeah.
guy chops his fingers off because he's about to tell him information, and then he's like, well, it's like a matter of
Yeah.
seconds.
Yeah, you didn't really see it coming or anything. It was just everything was very fast in that scene. Yeah. Very
I was
good.
gonna say another Cohen touch is even in the hanging when you're seeing those three gentlemen getting hanged in their own little monologues, and of course they don't give the indigenous prisoner his time to even
Right.
say his little piece.
Yeah. Yeah, that was good.
And the one guy's like, I killed the wrong man. Had I killed the right man, I probably wouldn't be here. And I see men worse than me out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not quite as good as is this your first time for hanging?
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
That part of it.
I think with Buster Scruggs, my favorite two segments, of course, is the Buster Scruggs one and the one with where they're basically on the trail with the widow and the guy.
The girl who got rattled. Yeah, definitely
Yeah,
not the Liam Neeson one.
the Liam Neeson one is very disturbing.
Woo. Yeah,
that,
good. It's
I
very
was like,
but it is disturbing.
It's tough.
But it's good, and it's a very, very strong metaphor for
And then it ends with the dead and
yeah,
James Joyce.
it's very good.
All the way.
those Coens. So this movie was nominated for 10 Oscars, including none. Best Picture, Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Actor. Though they nominated Haley Steinfeld for supporting actress, even though she's the lead of this movie. But I think that's more of like awards politics. They thought she had a better shot at supporting actor than lead. Also, maybe because of her age. I don't know. But that's
who won Best Actress that year? That's what I don't remember.
Natalie Portman for Black Swan.
Well, that's a tough category too.
Nat would have taken that one, and then she lost to Melissa Leo, I think.
She lost to Melissa Leo.
That's a tough one too. For The Fighter.
Yeah, that was
yes.
And that was between her. I think her and Amy Adams were like the two from the same movie.
Yeah.
That is back when, for whatever reason, the Academy was in love with everything David O. Russell was doing.
Yeah.
Like everything he did got multiple nominations. And I'm not saying they're bad movies, but like, because some of them are really good. I just, he's not exactly a nice guy, and it's kind of.
Those three at least they're watchable, and you can.
American Hustle is the weakest of those three films he did.
Yeah.
Except for Jeremy Renner, of all people.
Yeah, he was good. But there's a lot of the thing of that is that it's a lot of overacting. It's a lot of stereotypical act. It's not, I don't know. I mean, some of it's a fun watch, but a lot of it's just.
Well, he's clearly copying Scorsese's style, and that whole line where it's like sometimes the copy's better than the original is like, okay, calm down, sir.
Yeah.
But the funny thing about is we went to see this movie because we like to try and see all the Oscar movies when the nominations come out. And my stepdaughter went with us, and when we meet the De Niro character and it shows like a back like a of like his past or whatever, how scary this guy is.
Mm.
And she's kind of laughing at me, and my wife are like, "Oh, she doesn't know that Robert De Niro used to do like these roles all the time. She probably just knows him from like Meet the Parents and
Yeah, yeah.
his
Yeah, right,
comedies."
right.
It's like, no, this guy's scary.
That'd be great though. If that'd be like a Will Ferrell.
Yeah, right. Right.
Oh man.
But Sean, you mentioned the dialogue not having that Sorkin dialogue. Guess who they lost Best Adapted Screenplay to?
That was a good year for movies in general.
Yeah,
That
The
was,
Social Network.
Which is very sharp.
That is good. Yeah.
Which I don't think they had a chance at winning picture or director. Everyone kind of now debates about The Social Network should have won one of those or both of those instead of The King's Speech. I think it was a different time for the Academy. I also think people didn't think The Social Network would remain relevant. I think people thought it was just a product of its time. But I implore anyone to go back and rewatch it just for Rooney Mara's monologue where she just rips Jesse Eisenberg apart, and it just clearly brings up internet culture, especially internet bros and fans and trolls and everything that we are experiencing now with the internet. It's like, wow, this movie was onto something, even if they didn't know really what they were exploring.
It was very, and it had a lot of lesser knowns. It wasn't the same big traditional draw. That was very much, you saw the King's Speech and you saw that it was going to take whatever it wanted. From the Academy at the time, especially.
I mean, it's a very good movie and it's got a very good message. And Colin Firth, I mean, it's all really good actors doing, these are really great actors who never phone it in. It's Jeffrey Rush, Colin Firth, Helena Bonham Carter. It makes sense. It's a crowd pleaser. And sometimes that's what people want. They just want a crowd pleaser.
Right.
But is there anything else about True Grit you guys want to bring up, or something we haven't mentioned yet?
A couple things. I think that the how it's shot, the coloring of the film makes it look very kind of brings you back into that time. It looks like an old picture, kind of like how it's like a yellow, dusty kind of gray, whatever. I don't know. It's unique. it's a unique kind of filter that they put on it. So I think that's important. I think the setting of it is just very nice. You really feel like it's authentic. That it's a very the stage setting, the costumes, everything, and just the color of the film is fascinating.
Yeah, it does feel like how Roger Deakins shot this movie. It does feel like those portraits or paintings you see of like the Old West. Like it feels like wherever you see those, if it's just like of a cowboy or of a wagon train or anything, it feels like they took those portraits and made it look like that. And it's interesting because I think the Western and the musical share something because they used to be like the two dominant genres of Hollywood for decades. And they kind of disappeared. And every once in a while, one comes and everyone's like, oh, they're back. And then they kind of disappear. It's like they make a couple and then they go away. And then they come back again. And like only a handful of them like stand up. And I think that's why they don't make as many, is because I think they cost a lot of money, which is weird, but why Westerns cost so much. But
yeah.
But I think that's another factor. But also, maybe that helps us just stay refreshed. They don't make as many because then we're like, oh, there's another Western or oh, there's
Mhm.
another musical.
Yeah.
I'm not great for there aren't as many musicals constantly, and my children, they'd be on non-stop vacation. I really thought the cinematography and the panoramic vistas were just great. It goes back to everything from Monument Valley, like initial throwback westerns, and I haven't really seen that scope. Even something like 310 to Yuma doesn't go as big in terms of shooting, except for I think like the Power of the Dog. That was really one of the ones I've seen lately that goes kind of that big in terms of shooting the area, especially even like the night ride back. It's
This
just
is
The
interesting with that one because it doesn't. That one changes a bit. And I was going to bring that up because it's not the same kind of shooting that you see in the rest of the movie. It almost becomes, and it becomes kind of delirium because she's been bit. She's kind of by that snake, and she's so she's kind of you get the sense that she's already delirious
Right.
because she's saying we have to get Cheney as they're riding back, all this stuff, and in the background you see different shots. It doesn't stay the same, but it doesn't come up. It doesn't come off as authentic and as real as the rest of the movie does. It comes up. It's different. The background.
until they pan up, and then you just see the immensity of the open
Yeah,
space, and
of
you're
the
just
old-
like,
yeah.
oh my
Yeah.
gosh, there is nothing.
Yeah.
I was just looking up the Oscars again for that year because you mentioned the cinematography, and of course, Roger Deakins is considered, if not the greatest living cinematographer, one of them. And of course, everyone's like, when is he going to win an Oscar? He got nominated a bajillion times before he finally won for Blade Runner. And interesting, he lost to Wally Pfister for Inception. So I wonder if they were just giving Inception an Oscar because they didn't give The Dark Knight as many nominations as people thought it should have gotten.
And this one, well, the cinematography here, because it's more traditional, I don't think at the time people realized how big it was and what he was doing. And the idea of like filming the night sky is really tough. So therefore you have to like really pay attention and structure those shots. And I think it's very much when you find out it's Roger Deakins, you're like, oh, that makes sense. And you're watching it, you don't necessarily think, oh, that's definitely his. But looking back on it, you can see the art that went into those shots and those frames. It's the same way you hear the art put into production design and costuming and just sound mixing. And I think that's what makes this so impressive is the fact that each of those elements individually is very strong and the craft is fantastic. But they don't override any of that while you're watching. The way like say 1917 did.
Yeah, or even another Western he shot, which is one of the most gorgeous movies I've ever seen, The Assassination of Jesse James. Like, the cinematography is even more like you're seeing it more in that movie where you're like, look at me with my camera.
that is a gorgeous movie. Now, The Revenant is not a western per se, but it is a period piece, and that's a gorgeous movie as well.
Well, that's another great cinematographer, and I would argue because I'm not the hugest Inarritu fan, but I would argue like some of the best stuff in his movie are the cinematography, and that's one of the best parts of the movie for me. I'm just not a. It's a good movie. I'm just not a huge fan of it, and especially with the whole Leo Oscar campaign, like look what he did to have to get an Oscar.
A whole lot of movies that were really good.
Yeah,
Right, like I'm like he did a lot of other really good performances where he didn't have to like get beat up by a bear and
Achievement Oscar. That's body of work.
yeah. Yeah, it's so much more than just giving a good performance. Like you have to go out there and schmooze and politic and
Mhm. Take out advertisements.
You have to
yeah.
everything. You have to just every event.
And what's interesting about the Oscars is they love an ingenue with a young actress. They are all about giving a young actress an Oscar. But, like, for whatever reason with male actors, particularly male actors who are considered handsome, they're like, "No, you gotta wait till you're old to get an Oscar.
You have to make sure you're good at it, not just pretty.
We want you to earn your Oscar." Because like, Brad Pitt didn't get one till Once
three
Upon a
years.
Time in Hollywood, and I mean, Paul Newman didn't get one till he was like in his 60s. All these, it's like, oh nope, you got to earn that Oscar. We got to make sure you're actually talented.
And that's what will be coming up again soon in the next season.
Yeah.
Shake out.
I think I don't know who else is favored right now, and I haven't seen the movie, and I know it's getting mixed reviews, but that's also just Darren Aronofsky as a director. But I'm hearing Brandon Fraser's got good chances of getting an Oscar nom this year for The Whale.
I've heard that too. Yeah, everybody seemed very when they debuted the film and that scene he got out, everybody gave him a standing ovation and stuff. He's very emotional about it, so that was nice to see.
Yeah, I had to explain because Chris posted a funny thing on our page because I guess at Venice they were like clocking how many different movies had a standing ovation and how long the standing ovation was. He posted something about I just watched Ghostbusters for the 37,000th time and gave it a 37-minute standing ovation, and someone's like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
I did not realize that like they actually timed them and that like everyone got one. So like that's why you have to time them. And I was like, oh wow, okay.
Yeah, it got ridiculous for whatever reason, and I heard like Sam Mendes for Empire of Light was waiting to go on stage before so I guess he wanted to see how long they would clap for him. Which some of these movies that got standing ovations, I'm hearing mixed reviews. So I'm wondering if some of the audience in there that were giving it a standing ovation are like peers in the industry, and they're just
And
being
everybody
nice.
just gets up.
I'm like,
being polite.
Two people stood up. Now I have to stick there.
Yeah.
They're next to me. Fine.
Conditioning.
Yeah, this weekend's movie, I guess, was one of those. That had a really awkward one.
Yeah. But I think this is one of their best movies, which is weird because it's always hard for me to rank these movies of theirs because I feel like with the exception of probably 2 or 3, they're all really strong movies to me.
And very different in their takes, their approaches, their feels. We already talked about rewatchability.
The other thing I like to mention at the end is that it's interesting that none of them they don't get to see each other again, and I think that's pretty important because even when she's on her way, she finally got heard back from him, but he passed away just before whatever she got to see him, and then she hopes to see Matt Damon's character, his name, but she hopes to see him again, and that's how it ends. So you never know. I'm assuming that it never happens, though. They don't get to see each other again after all that, and I think that's interesting, and that speaks not only to that uniqueness of everything, but also to that time period. They don't have you can't do a Google search for somebody. You can't find anybody. Back then, it's very hard to maintain those connections with anyone.
Yeah,
that's really interesting. You could go through something with somebody and never see them again. That's kind of a foreign thing to many who in this modern generation who don't understand. Like, oh, why don't you just look them up on Facebook or Instagram or something like that?
Social network.
It's such a different time. The world was so much bigger than it is now, and you have this little story that only 3 people really know, and they never get to share it with each other again. So that's so important.
And to have it be so meaningful and never to speak to them again without romantic connection, because that
and
would
then
be
every
a traditional
day
story.
Thinking about it or being like, I wonder where this person is.
To bring him back and bury him in the family plot.
Right.
Shows the depth of the connection, and they're like, oh, she's crazy. She never even saw the guy. She only knew him for like a week.
But
the depth of that connection.
But I mean, that's a life-altering experience, and also, that's something you very rarely, even though they never see each other again, that's a once-in-a-lifetime experience and connection, and especially because she's at such a young age, that's gonna make a huge impact. And Not only is there no social media internet, if there were telephones by the time she's an adult, it was still harder to call people, and like even traveling was a big deal.
Mm. And who would even know if, you know, Rooster probably wouldn't even have a telephone.
No.
Who knows if Matt Damon would bother with it, you know? So it's just interesting, and it kind of speaks to what we, just to make another point, what we use, the artificial relationships that many people have today, you know, that don't carry that same depth. It's just an interesting contrast, you know, time wise, time era. I thought that was a neat point.
Yeah, and I really like that actress who plays the older Maddie at the end of the movie. Like,
Mm.
just her little bit of scene is great. And like, like the one gentleman gets up and pays his respects, and then she calls the other guy, "All right, trash,"
Yeah.
because he didn't even bother to stand up or anything.
And that's when you see the consequence of her. You see she's missing an arm, you know, because you don't.
Yeah.
She doesn't tell you that. You don't find out about that until you know, you see her. You know, so that's, you know, that's interesting.
And the interesting thing about this film with both Maddies is they had to find a body double for that actress who only had one arm for those scenes. And
Yeah,
then
I read that. Yeah.
and with Haley Steinfeld, because she's a minor, and they have strict rules of how long a minor can work on a film set. And most of this movie is shot at nighttime. With They would do scenes where she's not, like, it's over her shoulder or something. They would use a body double for like the scenes with the actors where she didn't have to be, her face didn't have to be in the shot.
Mm.
That's why she's supporting.
Yeah.
The number of minutes of actual Haley Steinfeld is just not there.
Well, I mean, Anthony Hopkins has a lead actor Oscar, and I think he's only in Silence of the Lambs for 17 minutes.
Mm.
I think it's less than 20 minutes of screen time.
You can make up the rules as you go.
Yeah, that's the Academy. But is there anything else before we talk about? I try to create a unique rating for each director we talk about. So if you don't have anything else, we'll get into the ratings of this.
Well, go ahead.
Okay, so if we love this movie, we think it's a masterpiece, we think it's one of their best movies, we call it a damn fine picture. If it's entertaining, it hits its marks, it does what a movie needs to, we call it quirky but delightful, because most of the Coen's films have a little bit of quirkiness to them. There's always a deep dive rating. That's if you feel like this is for fans or cinephiles, or it's a cult, it's not something everyone's going to enjoy. Then if it's mediocre, it just doesn't quite get there. We say it was funny looking, And then if it's absolute garbage, it's horrible, and it just wasn't well made at all. It's what you would explain what most plots of a Coen Brothers film is, a clusterfuck. But this one, I think, stands against what most of even though it is very much their movie, it has their humor, it has their touches, like that part of their theme is kind of missing a little bit. It's kind of there, but not really, because this is a very conventional movie compared to most of their films.
I would say it's a damn fine picture. That's my opinion. I think it's excellent.
And I think the rewatchability gives it that extra push, because like Inside Llewyn Davis is very good. I never want to watch it again, except for the scene with the recording studio. Other than that, like,
is it just because of how much torture they give that man in the movie?
Yeah, I'm like, okay, I'm good. I get it. I understand and I appreciate. But the fact that this one just lends itself to rewatching, revisiting, and not just from an analytical, critical lens, but just entertainment-wise, it's nice.
It's a very human movie, I think, because the other ones like Llewyn Davis and all that stuff kind of puts one person under a microscope, and you're just kind of staring at people as these terrible things happen and these decisions that they're making happen. And this one's more broad, and you start to feel you just get connected to people in different ways.
The
And I think
universality of
that's
it is
yeah, I think
really
that's why.
nice.
I
And
think that's
it's
why I
optimistic,
like it.
despite the
It's
pessimism.
but not without consequence,
Right.
and not without sacrifice, and not without those things. So I think it's very good. I would give it the top rating.
Yeah, it's definitely a damn fine picture in my book. And y'all nailed every bit of it. It's the rewatchability and the dialogue and everything about it. So it's just such a great. And again, I'm also a big fan of westerns, and it was such a treat to have a western treated that way and given the best um, cinematography and the best dialogue treatment and the best story adaptation and brought to that level. Because when you see we talked about it earlier, the westerns getting treated with that scope that a good western needs, and that's again having a huge scope, that's having great settings and locations, and again cinematography, and it got all of that, and top-notch acting. So yeah, it's a damn fun movie.
I think that's a very good point. They took good care of it. You know what I mean? They took real good care of the story. They wanted to present it in a way that it would really reach people, and I don't think it was, and not in the sense of we're going to come out and we're going to make the Coen Brothers movie the way that we make movies. They kind of, it just seemed like they really did want to give this some reverence, knowing that it was kind of a classic, knowing that it was a classic story. They wanted to take care of it. And I think that's key for people who do like westerns and western things, because so often they get, and some of them they get kind of thrown away like, oh, it's another shootout movie or whatever. So it was nice to see that come together. I think that's very good point.
Yes, this is a damn fine picture. I think Sean and Dan, you guys bring up an interesting point. This is one of those rare movies that, yes, it's a very conventional, it's very entertaining. It's got that watchability, but it also there's enough there, like you mentioned, the reverence and the connection to the characters. There's enough there for people who are more, oh, I watch movies to analyze. Like there's stuff there for those type of audience too, but there's stuff there for people who just want to sit down for 2 hours and watch an entertaining film and be invested in the story. And I think a lot of times people who like to criticize and analyze movies kind of push entertaining movies to the side and put it in a different level, but sometimes things are just top-notch filmmaking all around. And I think the other thing the Coens did with this, besides treat the story with respect and give it that emotional heft that most movies in the genre don't, is this very much feels like this could have been made in the classic era of when westerns were dominated. Because even as good as some modern westerns are, there is a bit of modernism to them, where it's like if Quentin Tarantino makes a western, it's a western, but it's a Quentin Tarantino version of a western, so it doesn't feel like it could have been made when John Wayne and Clint Eastwood were leading this
It's
genre as the
fits with the
star.
storytellers.
I was just going to say The Searchers is a very, which wasn't really popular at the time. It became popular later when people look back on it. But that's a very long, it's got a interesting plot to it, and a lot of different subplots and all these different stories that kind of come together. And it doesn't, in some parts of it, it's not a perfect movie. It's not seamless, um, but the effort there that they put into it is remarkable. But yeah, I agree.
Well, the profanity was really kept at bay in this movie too, compared to other
It was, yeah.
Coen Brothers movies.
This one's, I think, a PG-13.
Yeah, this is one of their few PG-13 rated films. And that also is probably because it's been a while. I read the novel when this version came out, but I don't think there's a lot of profanity in the novel. So that could just be them wanting to keep with the prose of Charles Portis's book as well, even though they're
It
putting.
would have ruined the dialogue a little bit if there was a
Right.
lot in there, you know.
Well, it just goes to show that you don't, I mean, me, I've been, as long as I've been watching movies, I'm 39, profanity just does not bother me anymore. And it's just one of those things. I know when to use it, not to use it, and when to turn the TV down. But this just goes to show you that you don't have to have, a lot of colorful words to have really good dialogue and to make a movie. And they made a good point.
It does bother me when it's not well written. Like,
Right.
there are certain actors and writers who can use it as prose and it sounds like it works within the universe of the film. And this just could be a personal thing for me, but like when Rob Zombie uses profanity in his movies, it feels like he just couldn't think of other words to put in the script. And he's like, well, this is just how these people talk. And it
Right.
just doesn't work the same way.
Well,
Like if a Coens or a Tarantino are using profanity,
keep in mind too, Rob Zombie movies are just modern day grindhouse movies. And
Yeah,
they're supposed to have an aura of trash around them and be uncomfortable and just icky. And he delivers it. I mean, but I do understand where you're coming from. Like it's in the way it's used. Like I was going to bring up Deadwood again. There were certain points in that where it just felt like it was unneeded. But when it was in some scenes where it was used, especially with Al Swearingen, he wove it like this tapestry of profanity. It just came out and kind of worked with his character because of his character. But
that's probably part of the writing and also just Ian McShane's ability as an actor to use those words in a way to make it sound like they're prose. But before we end, Dan, you mentioned something about The Searchers, and I do think that's an incredibly well-made movie. And even though John Ford was guilty of villainizing the Native American and indigenous people of America, he did do a lot for the community, especially during the Depression of these people that worked on his films. And then he did make Cheyenne Autumn, but he also was like, John Wayne's character is not a good guy. He's kind of a bad person.
Yes.
And a racist.
He fought for the Confederates, and he didn't like Native Americans. You know what I mean? And he was not a good guy. Yeah, I think that's part of what makes it interesting. Is all of that. So,
and that to be made at the height of cowboys and Indians style westerns that were popular at that time was a pretty risky move.
Well, I'm kind of surprised that John Wayne even took the part.
Well, it's because it was John Ford.
Yeah,
John Ford gave him his career.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to John Wayne taking his roles. He wanted to be seen as 7 foot tall and invincible and just this badass cowboy. But yeah, you're right. The Searchers was what showed him in that light.
And I think it's one of the films that highlights that he did have a little bit of a acting ability. Like he could play with his persona a little bit. He wasn't just, well, let me tell you what's up here.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
But thank you both for coming on the show. Thank you both for being able to reschedule. I know we talked about doing a Ridley Scott film. I've not seen that film, so when we get around to it, I'm going to apologize that it's not going to be near the quality of this movie.
Is that Prometheus?
No, that's the one I wanted. Nope, I believe we have the Christian Bale one.
Yeah.
Which one's that?
God's.
Oh.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I've just heard of it.
Wow.
What is it?
Exodus, Gods and
Really?
King. It's
I like
Oh,
a
it.
no.
Moses movie, but it's almost all white actors, so it might
Oh.
rival when we talked about 1492 as that
Oh
movie.
no, I haven't seen that either. Wow,
Yeah.
that's gonna be
It has Joel Edgerton as Ramsey.
hmm
man. Okay, when is that one?
I don't know yet because I had to reschedule a couple of things, but I will get with you guys when we get there.
I'm not in a huge rush.
No,
That's gonna be so weird. I'm kind of want to watch it. It's just
we
see
might
how
want to
bad
do
it
that
is.
one as a night recording so we can drink while we talk about it.
And just be like, just watch it at the same time and be like, why? Just why?
Man, you know you can
Yeah.
watch movies through StreamYard, so that might be a possibility to do it.
Especially since it was made in 2014. Like this wasn't made in 1984 where like okay,
Wow.
like you could have cast actors of appropriate race for this movie.
It'll be interesting. It'll be
Yeah. Ridley Scott is an interesting, lots of ups and downs. Not as solid as the Coen's track record.
Mhm.
interesting. But this one, I think, is he was playing with technology for it. I think that's the main reason he wanted to make it was a scope.
He's
So that'll be interesting.
he's just an interesting guy to see what he does. He's just one of those.
I want my
But-
third David movie. It's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about Prometheus. We had a guest who's been on a couple of times. He was like very adamant about that movie. Like
That tends to be
It's
the
a neat
case.
film.
If you love it, people
It's
will
so funny.
very much
It's funny
dedicate
though
to
because
it.
when that came out, we went and saw it. We did not like it when we saw it in the theater. We didn't like it.
And then
And
you just
then
sit with
when
it
we
and
started watching it again, and we're like, it's not bad.
And then
It's
now
not
it's-
bad.
It took a rewatch for me too. Like I don't think I did it. It wasn't that I didn't like it. I just had to process it, and I had to watch it again just to comprehend it. And
it's not an
absorb
alien
it.
movie. It's a complete turd.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
I think the studio and audiences wanted this to be closer to the franchise, and I think Ridley Scott's like, no, I'm more interested in this giant alien that's just in the first movie. We're gonna talk about God and
Well, I love that it expanded on the lore, and I love that. I mean, I thought it was great.
I think Alien Covenant was like a compromised version of
that was two different movies. Yeah,
Shoved
very
into
much.
one.
And there's the David movie, and then there's the Alien movie, and they tried to put them together. So,
The David part is definitely more interesting than
yes.
the Alien part. But before we leave, there was an interesting criticism of a critic or podcaster I know who really, well, I don't know him personally, but I listened to his show, and he was on Screen Drafts ranking the Alien versus Predator movies. And his mention of Prometheus was like, okay, I'm tired of everyone complaining about Prometheus, that scientists and people wouldn't act this stupid. He's like, we've just lived in COVID, so we know people are that stupid to just stick their faces and stuff.
See what happens.
Yeah.
But thank you guys again for coming on. Thank you for your
Thanks for having us.
insights.
Having this. Yeah.
And I know you guys have busy schedules, so I appreciate you being able to reschedule and come on and talk about this movie. It's a blast. I did not mind watching it twice in the past month.
No, not at all.
Definitely. Yeah.
And I don't know if you guys have anything to plug or if you want to mention your social media, you can. If not, that's cool. You don't have to.
No good.
I don't know
Gotcha.
what that is.
Well, you guys enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Okay.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank
for
you.
having us.
Absolutely. You're welcome back. I'm sorry the next movie's not going to be as good, but
That's
I
all
can
right.
make
We'll get through
amends.
That's fun for a different reason, though.
That's
We
true.
will.
It is sometimes fun to talk about a truly horrible movie with
Oh my
people.
god! Oh, before you go, we were watching Jurassic World Dominion this
Oh,
weekend,
God.
Oh,
and
So if you ever want to hear thoughts on
my
that one,
Sean was on fire while we were watching that one.
man, yeah,
I'm
that's what.
Oh,
Yeah.
So funny.
how does that franchise keep making $1 billion? Who are going to see these movies?
It was
because you
so
hope
bad.
for something.
It was so bad, but Sean was on fire for that one. So that
Well,
was,
I vote we MST3K the gods and demons or whatever it's called. Whatever we're gonna watch with Christian Bale.
It might have to be.
Oh Lord. But yeah, those Jurassic movies, like I'm now convinced Jurassic Park 3 might be the second best Jurassic Park movie. Just because it knows it's a B movie.
Yeah.
Even though it's not good, but like, yeah. I'm like, every time they make a new Jurassic Park movie, I just want to like have the Jeff Goldblum monologue from the first movie playing. Like, stop it.
That's very much this movie.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Like they just feel soulless to me. Like they're just product.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like as much as people complain about the
Full
Marvel
sales.
movies, I'm like, well, at least the Marvel movies usually have something entertaining in them, like that I get out of it. Like
This
I
one-
get I get nothing out of these Jurassic World movies other than like, oh well, this character's kind of interesting, but like
You
this
know what?
one was
The effect that I get is I reminisce about getting to see the original Jurassic Park in theater, and I'm like, man, why can't it be this great again? And then it's just you weep a little bit.
This one's very much on nostalgia fumes.
Yeah.
yes, a lot. And I was completely surprised they didn't make the pilot character somehow connected to Samuel L. Jackson's character because she
Oh
says
my God.
similar lines. I was like, oh, is she going to end up like being his daughter or something?
It was probably cut at the last
Yeah,
second.
they probably thought about that. Then they're like,
Just
hold
like-
on.
Maybe you know what?
That goes a little
What
too
if we
far.
make a fourth?
that's where it's
Well,
Like,
they
and what's-
might because it made a lot of money.
in the Jurassic World, I remember seeing that, and I was like, I mean, it's not the greatest, you know. And
It's
then
entertaining, and you're like, I had like a very
after
was
the,
the
after
injection
the
of
second,
nostalgia was good.
we had fun. with
yeah,
it.
Yeah.
after the second film, though, man, I was like, what in the world is going on? Clones and like all this. I'm like, no, they lost it. I totally lost it after that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Franchise that somehow won't die, even though they just get worse and worse with each movie.
Yeah.
Because maybe one day they'll get better. Maybe one day.
Hopefully they're done after this.
I never say never.
It inspired a theme park ride, merchandise.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to see this movie,
Well,
but
so did Twister, but we didn't see a Twister 2 or 3 or 4. Night of the Twister 5.
You know, you just like summon that into the happening though. So
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
there's people where we're gonna get a legacy sequel with Helen Hunt, and it's all gonna be about how we miss Bill Paxton, and
Yeah.
like it's
And
probably
how
gonna be a
It's going to be
kid.
like Jaws, where the tornado, like they can track it, and it's hunting them down. It's like
Twister the Revenge.
yeah, Twister the Revenge.
And-
Lord.
Oh
Well,
man, okay.
so thank you for cursing us with that.
But talking about franchises that'll never die, I am excited to see this movie, but like just the title, like Halloween Ends, I'm like, but does it end? Does it really end?
I
Is it
thought-
ending?
When I saw the trailer before something that we watched this year, I was like, didn't
No, it's
this
going
just
to
come
end
out?
with Halloween H2O or whatever.
There was another, and
that was
like
supposed to be the end of it.
I really don't know what's left. But I guess Halloween is annual, so
There you go. I just hope if this isn't the end, I hope they go in the direction they tried to go 40 years ago. Now that people like Season of the Witch now and try to do anthology films instead of somehow Michael Myers at 70 years old is running around murdering people.
Trick or treat, basically. Just do a different, a movie with different vignettes. That'd be cool.
you know it's over when they get to November. If the next one's called like November 1st, then it's done.
Yeah.
There we go. What does Michael Myers do on the day after Halloween?
Only like
Does he just
Crawls-
chill?
He crawls
he
into
starts Christmas shopping, getting ready for next year.
Ready for Thanksgiving.
he crawls into a spirit Halloween and
Exactly. Just
into
sits in a van and waits.
that's hidden. Yeah, and he hibernates year round.
Well, we know he's not a big fan of family gatherings, so
Yeah.
That is what it is.
That's good.
Well, we are pulling, Cody. We're pulling a Return of the King with 10 endings. So
Yeah, that's what
All
we
right.
do.
Signing off.
All right.
Promise.
Thank
no,
you guys
I'm just
again.
I'm joking. Yeah, thank y'all so much. It was fun getting to talk this cool Western.
Great.
Masterpiece in my mind. Have a great day. And Chris,
As
as
well.
always, thank you for coming on.
Thanks.
And yeah, we look forward
Mhm.
to talking to you again. All right. Bye.
Yep.